Get 2 Billy Meyer DVDs for the price of one. Get your copy of And Did They Listen? One of the greatest secrets hidden in plain sight for decades. And As the Time Fulfills, the most definite documentary on the Billy Meyer UFO contacts. Get both DVDs for the price of one. Go to theyfly.com now.
Hi, everybody. This is Michael Horn coming to you for show 12, I think is what it is. And we're going to touch on a topic that is a little more geopolitical today. To introduce this idea, I want to, of course, say to everybody, if you're not yet familiar with what's known as the Billy Meyer UFO case, I really do invite you to familiarize yourself. Come to my website, my blog, etc., and you'll see the address for that, or for those. You're going to be introduced to the idea that the Billy Meyer case is the singularly authentic UFO contact case. And that means that despite all sorts of claims of UFO contact with extraterrestrials and alien abductions and all of the stuff that fills the airwaves and the pages online and in newspapers about so-called extraterrestrials and aliens, that the only case that we have actual independent, scientifically authenticated proof for is the Billy Meyer case, and often called the Meyer contacts. I'll just say a little more about that, meaning that you can prove this case to yourself if you take the time. You can examine the abundant physical evidence, which is truly unparalleled, and that means hundreds of clear, primarily daytime UFO photos that Meyer took all during the pre-digital, pre-computer, pre-internet era, beginning in 1964 and ending in about 1981, at which time Meyer actually was taking photographs of a UFO from 15 feet away that was literally parked in his front yard. Hard as that may be to believe. The clearest films as well, 8 different films, a video, sound recordings made in front of 17 eyewitnesses in an open field. There was an undercover policeman present when this happened. 4 different sound labs independently authenticated these recordings as being of an unknown source. They were so loud, the events were so loud that people came from over 4 kilometers away to try and figure out what that sound source was. Meyer turned over metal alloy samples as well for independent examination and authentication at IBM. Okay, tons of physical evidence in the case. What I call the higher standard of proof is what I also refer to as the prophetically accurate scientific and world event-related information that Meyer began publishing when he was only 14 years old in 1951. At that time, he was foretelling specifically man-made climate change, the advent of very bizarre new types of laser weapons, the dangers created by all of these things, especially for the people of Earth, as the climate change, the man-made climate change, was going to produce an increase in the intensity and the frequency of all manifestations of upheaval in the environment, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, storms, blizzards, tornadoes, hurricanes, weather changes that would only increase as the decades rolled on. 1958, he specifically warned of unnatural man-made global warming. At that same time, he was warning about other events and situations that would come upon us in this world if humankind, if we did not alter the direction in our personal and collective lives, in the direction of our national and international lives. He foretold in 1958 that there would come virtually irrepressible, worldwide Islamist, fundamentalist terrorism. 1958. That was the same year that he also foretold that the United States of America would have two wars, two Gulf wars with Iraq, and that the second war would be led by a president who would be the son of a former president. 1958. Now, I mention this year because in addition to also foretelling specifically and by name AIDS, and foretelling that we would carry portable phones and transact with plastic credit cards and dozens, actually well over 150 other specific prophetic items, Meyer foretold the coming of what he called at that time the European Union, or the EU. Now, it hadn't come into existence yet, as most of you, certainly those of you in the UK and Europe, already know. Why was he concerned about the EU, which he called specifically the EU dictatorship? He was concerned because, among other things, the machinations of this dictatorship would be to lead the way, along with the United States of America, from which I'm recording this presentation, to biochip every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth, to enslave the populace. In 1958, certainly that didn't register in anybody's mind. As a matter of fact, nobody responded. Nobody carried forth this information, despite the fact that Meyer sent it around the world to warn people. There's so many other things in that document, freely available at theyfly.com, that when you read it, you will be startled by what he verifiably foretold. And that has occurred well after we posted it in English in about 2004 on our website. This biochipping that would take place would be the final enslavement of humankind. It would be, as I said, led by the EU dictatorship. Now, he views the EU as a dictatorship led by psychopaths who will, at all costs, to all people, bring forward and make sure that this dictatorship exists, survives, and cannot be rebutted or refuted by anybody, including the good people in Europe, and perhaps especially at this time, by the people in your country who will have a vote later in June about what I think is called Brexit. Now, there are a number of very, very, very specific statements about the EU that Meyer published in 1987 in something called the Hanok Prophecies, another prophetic document of Meyer's, the contents of which are unfortunately, virtually unfailingly being corroborated and confirmed as they unfold before our very sleepy eyes, day in and day out. Some of the things foretold in that particular document, well, the current or recently experienced Ebola epidemic, not an outbreak, a flurry of something that passes, epidemic. Meyer published this in 1987. That epidemic actually began within the past couple of years, didn't it? When it struck hard as an epidemic, hopefully under control now, but we don't know for sure. In that same document, Meyer foretold Russian military movements that would take place. He specifically foretold that Russia would move troops to a kind of remote area in northern Russia, called Arkhangelsk. This document has been available in English since 2002. Russia moved its troops to Arkhangelsk somewhere after or around 2012. There's no question. He named the specific city. That prophetic information was so startling that a man I've known for over 50 years, who was initially a skeptic about the Meyer case, gave us a video specifically endorsing Meyer's prophetic accuracy and the need for our own United States, American military to take his information very seriously. Now, coming back to this document, Meyer also in this 87 document foretells the destruction of the World Trade Center, the WTC. And he also states that the United States of America will go on a very large worldwide campaign to try to bring everybody in the world under our control with the excuse of fighting terrorism and peaceful globalization. As I said, that's been online since 2002, and in German, of course, before that. Some of the things that are said in that document that pertain to the fate of the United States are very, very daunting, highly unpleasant, because it does not portend a bright future for my country. But I'm going to read you verbatim just a couple statements about the EU, and you can determine for yourself what you think and decide what your own contribution towards the remaining or exiting the Brexit would be. Here we go. And this is starting in the middle of a document from 87. Nevertheless, that won't be everything, for the idea of creating a European Union has already arisen in various high leaders of Europe, through which the people who will comprise it will be greatly limited in their freedom, as well as the various provincial governments that will sell off their countries entrusted to them to this European Union, which will exhibit very strong dictatorial tendencies. Brussels in Belgium will become the governmental center for this union, and the responsible persons there will acquire tremendous compensations which will have to be paid for by the countries belonging to the union and their populations. That's you folks. They will call these compensations fair pay, for which the citizens of all union member countries will have to perform hard work in the sweat of their brows. And through these, the leaders of the European Union, the psychopaths, will be able to live in the lap of luxury at the expense of the citizens, and will be able to laugh at the stupidity of their advocates. The rulers of the individual countries, as well as those of the European Union in Brussels, will gradually take it so far, even to the point where they will want to sue and punish their rejectors, complainants, and critics. Folks, that's happening now, isn't it? Those who speak up against it. 1987 is when Meyer printed this foretelling for the first time, published it. And here's a telling paragraph for you to consider. And the doings of the European Union will ultimately be the decisive reason for the fact that from the East, military forces will invade Europe and will subjugate and destroy everything if the entire population of Europe and their governments do not rationally work against everything so that the threatening prophecies do not fulfill themselves. Part of what will happen here, and I'm now leaving aside the specific paragraphs, should Britain remain in the European Union, should that solidify, it will solidify as a dictatorship. It will cause war, worldwide war. That means confrontation with Russia and China. Remember what we just read about the countries from the East? That's not something that anybody wants, because that will also involve, of course, the United States ultimately, and the peoples of the world, all coming into this mess, into this mix-up of war because a hierarchy, a conglomerate of power-mad psychopaths have decided that the European Union is what you will be part of and what you will work for and what you will give your power over to. So without further ado, I invite you to visit theyfly.com and to consider this information and what is foretold for our world should you succumb to this European Union. Thank you and goodbye.
Get 2 Billy Meier DVDs for the price of 1. Get your copy of And Did They Listen? One of the greatest secrets hidden in plain sight for decades. And As the Time Fulfills, the most definite documentary on the Billy Meier UFO contacts. Get both DVDs for the price of 1. Go to theyfly.com now.